Let's just play a little jazz. Come on.
For me, the action is just a myth.
Fiend for heroes. Fiend for heroes. That's why I thought you was cool like that. Cool guy.
Hello and welcome to Mann-Splaining, the first episode of our series on the films of Michael Mann. Welcome to Framework. I'm John, one of the hosts of Framework. With me, as always, is the other host of Framework. Al, how are you today?
I'm great, man. I am excited to be doing Michael Mann, and especially because his first film we're talking about today, Thief, really strong debut. And coming off the long petering out we went through with Carpenter, it's just a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, man. No shade on Carpenter, but it's real nice to be talking about a movie like this. This is a hell of a film, and as it is one of the great Chicago films, probably.
Oh yes,
yeah. Of Chicago's own Dan Shea.
Hello.
Welcome, Dan.
Thank you so much for having me. You know, I was just thinking about it. I realized you guys, there's like a tradition where I come in on either the first or second of the movie, because we did Assault on Precinct 13, Piranha 2,
yeah,
now Thief, which I didn't realize when you asked me about this. Did not realize it was Michael Mann's first movie.
I had to look it up too, because I thought there was something before this actually, but it turns out it's just a TV movie. It's a Jericho Mile, which actually I pulled up on YouTube and watched. Not a bad for a TV movie from 1979 or whenever it was, but you know, it's TV production values from back then. It doesn't feel like, I mean, a big part of the Michael Mann experience is the polish. He does, you know, one of the things John and I like to talk about a lot is sound design, being the secret sauce in a lot of movies. And usually we talk about that in terms of like fantasy or sci-fi stuff, where it's most prevalent. But I think it's also a huge factor of Michael Mann's sort of the crime world that he creates. Starting here, this is like one of the most fully formed debut movies you're going to see from anybody. Like, yeah, even looking at who else Reservoir Dogs, going back, like looking at all the first films we've done. Reservoir Dogs, pretty fully formed Tarantino, although you can see him building up from there. You know, Nolan with Following, Cameron with Piranha 2, those don't really count. Those are very nascent. Fincher with Alien 3 is compromised in 100 different ways. And then, you know, Carpenter with Dark Star 2, that and Following are like student films. This is not a student film.
Usually the first film is like getting your feet under you kind of thing. You know, it's just sort of like, okay, like this is how a movie works. This is, here's who I am. Here are my ideas. I'd like to present them to you somewhat. And the great work, it's coming. This is building up to that. No, Thief is just a great work. Thief is just a terrific, expertly made film right out the gate. Like with a confidence and style and just understanding of so many aspects of filmmaking that it's almost hard to believe this is a debut film. I mean, you know, he came up in 70s TV. Even with that under his belt, it's tough to believe this resulted, unless, you know, the guy is a legitimate genius, which, you know, spoiler alerts, he is definitely. And you can see it right here in Thief.
But Michael Mann, it's not just about being a genius. And that's a word that I don't really think of in conjunction with him a lot, because genius to me, at least in the arts, it evokes a sort of, I don't know, an artistic, you know, flights of fancy, somebody weird and strange and messy. And Mann is so not messy. He's a craftsman first and an artist second. In my mind, I don't think that's actually like a true objective statement about him.
Well, those are the characters in Michael Mann films for sure.
Exactly. And that's why it makes so much sense that he would come out of the gate fully formed and as a total professional, because that's what his protagonists are. They come out of prison, because they're almost always coming out of prison. And in that time, the Michael Mann characters are consummate professionals, and they know themselves and what they want to an incredibly precise degree. And that doesn't mean they can get exactly what they want, or that they can like execute flawlessly, but they have a plan. In this case, James Caan has a vision board.
Sure does.
exactly knows exactly what he's aiming for and how he's going to get it. And that's Mann with this movie too. Like there's no I don't know, film school like lack of confidence, not quite knowing how to deal with anything. He knows who he wants to work with. He knows that he wants a level of insane precision that other filmmakers don't go for, but he also has a plan for how to get that, which includes Dennis Farina and, honest to God cat burglars who still have active warrants out for them when they're consulting on this film and all kinds of things.
Wonderful. Great stuff. The corrupt cop is that's like a big ex-con guy, right? Yeah. A lot of these guys are ex-cons or ex-cops or whatever. Farina was a cop, I believe, when he showed up as a crook in this, and then
he was an active Chicago police officer. And he put the cop as one of the gangsters' henchmen, and the cat burglar as one of the corrupt police officers.
Funny, it's really good, but like as just a film technician, I mean, yes, professional is a fine way to say it, but this has a visual palette that people are, trying to duplicate forever and never quite, there's nothing that quite feels like a Michael Mann film. And this one, more than any of them, maybe. I mean, look, he's made some excellent films, quite a few of them, in fact. I think it's possible this is his best film. I don't know. We're going to rewatch them all, but I think you could make the argument quite easily that that this is the most fully formed Michael Mann vision. This is just like the perfect Michael Mann object right from the start. All his fixations, all the things he does are present in this film. And in like overwhelming confidence, just like it's all right there to see immediately. From the opening credits, frankly, you can kind of feel that you're there. And he's there. He's just fully formed. From the light blue font and the Tangerine Dream, I'm all in on this thing.
Yeah. And that's what I found. Like you said, like viewing this, knowing that it was a first film, was how difficult it is in filmmaking to get a tone that carries from beginning to end.
Yeah.
That even going, when the sojourn out to California and, the ups and downs, and that like this kind of tone, this never goes away. And I feel like that's so hard. Even thinking back to Assault on Precinct 13 with John Carpenter, which I love that movie. And I love it for kind of watching the pieces of John Carpenter start to come together and be like, okay, it's not necessarily fully formed, but it is starting to put it together. And for him to be like, I almost wish I had watched this movie without knowing that it was his first movie, so that I could be surprised by that when I looked it up later. And I will tell you, so just, I watched this for the first time yesterday.
Wow.
Actually, technically today, because I started it, really putzed around last night and then started it around like 11:30. So kind of did like an overnight viewing and then rewatched a couple scenes this morning just to make sure that I had taken it all in. But
it's a pretty great movie to watch in Chicago at night.
Oh, it was the best. Overnight movie viewings are one of my favorite things too. Is just like turn all the lights off, put these headphones on and watch. And it's been on my list for a long time. I knew very little about it. I did not know that it was a Michael Mann movie until this. And honestly, speaking of, I know you guys got a few coming up, but I didn't, like, if you had asked me a week ago to name a bunch of Michael Mann movies, I think I probably would have rattled off Heat and then not really been sure about what the other ones were. I kind of going through he was one of those guys for me that I just, different than Tarantino or Carpenter or something like that, where I was just like, I'm actually not sure which, like once I saw, I was like, oh yeah, Insider Man. Oh yeah. He did Last of the Mohicans. I wasn't even know about that. So
I think most people would start with, it would be Heat and Collateral are probably the ones people know most from him. And then people could name Miami Vice because the TV show was famous, but I don't know that they would have seen the Miami Vice movie or having seen it like it that much, because that one's divisive.
Yeah.
Thief is underseen, but not very divisive. Everybody's pretty much on board with us here that this is a really rock solid crime movie. But here's one thing. Do you think this is this an 80s movie or a 70s movie?
I guess it's a 70s movie. But you can see the 80s, knocking on the door here, just in the music and the lighting and but script wise, the people who are
Yeah.
cast in it wise, it feels very 70s.
Well, James Caan is the 70s.
Yeah.
He's somebody that carries a patina of the 70s with him into the 20 teens. When you see him in Elf, it suddenly feels like wait, when is this movie set in present day, or is this set in 1978? Because Elf kind of could be anywhere, anytime.
Yeah. And it's also James Caan having gotten out of prison and something. So he went in during the 70s. So I feel like there's that where you get to a certain age and you don't necessarily represent the decade that you're in. You represent the decades that you were a youth and growing up and becoming. I would not say if somebody took a picture of me and said, this is what 2023 looks like, they would say, no, that's kind of what 2009 looks like. It looks like that guy hasn't changed in 15 years. So
I was thinking about it in terms of what they say about celebrities, that they all kind of freeze at the age at which they became famous. And maybe that's something similar is true of when people go into prison.
Well, that's certainly what this posits. He's stunted in specific ways because of he missed over a decade of time in prison. So, this is how Mann and Can view the character. That he's just sort of, he missed a lot of stuff, like the evolution of technology and learning.
But he's on the cutting edge of cat burgling technology and what is it? Plasma lancing, whatever the hell that is. It's pretty astounding. Just the level of work that these guys are willing to put in. And it's wild to me. I know that they're in the big heist in California, especially, that they say it's, I don't know, $4 or $5 million of a haul in 1981 money. And that's nothing to sneeze at. But I don't know, if it's me, I'm looking at this, I don't know, how big does it have to be before you're there's probably some easier money to be found that you don't have to cut a hole through the ceiling and go down an elevator shaft and invent a new torch to get through. There's just, I don't know, there's so many steps to the process that it's just there's so much margin for error in something like that. But these guys
not with them
are committed.
Yeah, I think they're doing the math on that, man. They are professionals. They know exactly what they're going to face. They know exactly how long it's going to take. They probably built in time for surprises.
They have. They're not rattled.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They got their shit together, and that's. To be fair, that's one of the main pleasures of watching Michael Mann films. This one in particular is watching professionals do their thing, watching process. It's a joy to behold all these safe cracking scenes. It looks like he's really cracking a safe, and you listen to the commentary track, which I did, and it's this is actual criminals teaching James Caan how to break a safe open. And
for a second there, I thought you said
how you do it.
Watching process. I thought you said for a second watching Prosky, and I was like, "Oh, we're jumping ahead to Robert Prosky already."
No, I'm not ready to talk about Prosky yet.
That's a whole section. Yeah, but what's remarkable about this actually is so this movie's called Thief, right?
Yeah.
Would you call this a heist movie?
Kinda. Yeah. I guess it's a crime movie more than anything. Right. But it's not what you would think of as a heist film. That has such a specific definition now, that it's it's an Ocean's 11 thing. And it's not that. So
the reason I don't think of it as a heist movie, there's two big heists in this movie, kind of big set pieces, the opening and then the California one. They both go off without a hitch.
Totally.
It's not.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that it becomes a final conflict is something else entirely that puts it more of a crime movie, makes it maybe feel like more of an action movie than a heist movie in my brain.
Yeah, it wouldn't be it's not a defining heist movie, that's for sure. It's more than anything, I think it's a character study.
Yes, that's so. It's okay. That's how it's a '70s movie, not an '80s movie. Then,
right.
Because my
it's less about
theory,
the actions of what's going on. It's less about that and more about what he's going through. I loved. Since we're talking, the break-in scene was incredible. I have not rewatched it yet, but I will be rewatching it today just because I was mesmerized of I'm a huge sucker for like you said, the process stuff. Especially when it's this era, analog, just showing the process of how this stuff works, because it's and I'm sure for audiences at the time and for me it's the same. We don't know exactly how to do this. If you ask me how to break into a safe in 1981 using all these analog tools, I couldn't tell you. So it feels like I'm watching a documentary on how to crack a safe, it would be a fascinating thing to watch. And it reminded me a bit of, not to bring other movies into this, but Blowout. You ever seen Blowout? The Brian
yeah.
De Palma?
Yeah.
Love that movie, mostly because it's about 45 minutes of just showing how analog sound production works. And it's just all these shots. And I felt like this was, I love that stuff. And it's almost like you don't see that as much anymore just because it's not as interesting now, because a lot of it is just a guy typing on a computer and then everything is happening in computers.
Yeah.
You know, it's all digital.
There's that. Well, I mean, we'll get to Black Hat eventually.
He gets there.
Which is Mann attempting to deal with that. I think the other problem is just it's riskier these days to put a long sequence with no dialogue in your movie, because people will look away from the screen and look on their phones or whatever.
Yeah.
And
And no music even. It's just, I believe there's no music in the whole.
Yeah. I mean, I think like once they're in, maybe it starts playing sort of like, and he's like taking off his welder's mask and lighting up a cigarette. You know, I think
a cigarette. Yes, absolutely.
One of my favorite moments. I wrote that down as one of my favorite moments because, again, having never seen this movie and having seen all these heist movies, I'm waiting for them to get busted. I'm like, okay, well, here's the part, and then
or does like
okay, what's going to go wrong?
You know,
so when he gets to the end and he sits down and is relieved and is kind of like, you know, like talking about Mann being able to create that mood, I had the exact same mood as he did, because I was like, oh shit, we did it, we cracked this safe, it went well, nothing happened, it was relief.
It's a great moment that whole sequence with like the magnesium rod, the really long magnesium rod that ignites like a sparkler, and then they're just melting through the bottom half of the safe. That is as thrilling as any like modern action scene to me. It is as exciting as anything they're doing in a latter Fast and Furious film or an MCU action. It's just them doing a thing. I've seen the movie. I know they don't get caught, and just watching them melt through metal and watching the sparks fly, you know, with the sort of the soft filter lens. That is, I'm just like, oh, this is so cool. Oh my God. I loved it. I'm having a blast with this. And yes, then him smoking a cigarette afterwards, taking a breath is just a cathartic. I'm not entirely sure how that works. Is it just that cool to look at? I mean, yes,
I think there's something magical about you guys. You can call it process, but it's also just the confidence of watching these people who know exactly what they're doing do a thing that you don't quite understand, but they're bringing in this heavy equipment and using it. You know, they have a special tool to shave off part of like a pipe to get to the wires inside without making too much of a mess or whatever. And we never saw that before. Still don't know what that does, but man, it's cool that he knows exactly how to use it. And it's something about, like the little beat that stuck with me was when they're just throwing the chairs aside in the room where they're going to bust out the torch. They're being so precise about getting into, you know, through here, through that, all this. And then there's this part where they just know it doesn't matter if we make a mess with this. It doesn't matter if we make noise. We have planned for this. And the chairs, they just chuck to the back of the room and then set up this incredibly precise operation.
Well, they say it's like a 16 to 18 hour procedure, right? At one point.
Yeah, they're going to be there all weekend, basically, which is crazy. Like the nerve that takes is one thing, but also just what that imparts to me, like the bit about throwing the chairs, what that imparts to me is, okay, these guys know exactly what they're doing and what matters and what does not. And that is sort of, you know, that's the whole draw of Michael Mann protagonists. The thing that he is so enamored with is people who know exactly which parts of their lives they can just chuck aside like an extra chair, in order to go after what they want with this incredible single-minded samurai focus.
Well, I'm reminded of it's the thing they talk about with Breaking Bad, which is if you respect that the character knows what he's doing, you know, that he is an expert at something, you're kind of more likely to forgive him. I mean, and that's funny because in, you know, Breaking Bad, the ways that Walter White is unprofessional is very much the point of the thing, you know, but it's the same kind of like, I mean, there's pretty much nothing likable about Frank in this story, but it doesn't matter in the least. You are compelled and you are with him as the protagonist. And I think a huge part of that is just that he's so fucking good at what he does. Like, he's just like, you have absolute faith in him to be able to handle what is thrown at him in this film. Partially because you're scared of him.
You're definitely right that that's the main thing, is the professionalism draws us in more than, you know, traditional, what do you call, save the cat moments or anything. But I would disagree that there's nothing likable about him. I think his relationship with Willie Nelson is this weirdly sweet thing.
I
And
mean, I
the
like him.
romance.
I do like him in this.
Yeah.
I have thoughts on the romance, though. We'll get to
But
that.
yeah, we should let's talk about the romance now, because
Okay.
this is a man staple. This incredibly fast-paced romance where these guys, who live with no attachments, no connections, will then throw themselves into a romance in like full bore in 30 seconds notice. And I don't like the way that this starts. The romance of Tuesday Weld in this movie. Everything that leads to them getting into the booth at the Howard Johnsons is full on demented.
Yeah.
and then weirdly, once they're in that booth, this romance develops that becomes it's really strangely believable and genuinely affecting, in spite of all of that abject insanity packed into the couple minutes leading up to that, getting into that booth. These people, this is their first date, and he is behaving like an absolute lunatic and flashing. I mean, it's a kidnapping at one point.
Yeah. They do a pretty good job of establishing these characters as people who are looking for this in their lives, whether they know it or not. I mean, well, Khan knows it, but
He knows it, yeah.
yeah. But I mean, it is. I don't think they're in love. Is the thing. Like, I don't really believe that they have that connection. I think that, in a sense, they are both checking a box. I mean, especially Khan. Khan, has this idea that, I mean, this is the whole point of the character, I think, is that if he is a father and a husband and has money and security, that means he's succeeded. He's gotten all the Xbox achievements unlocked if he gets those things and he lands in a place. And so it is because he's a professional and stunted a little bit from his time in prison. He's just kind of going through the things he thinks equal a happy life. What he understands to be a happy life. I think the only real relationship he has is with Willie Nelson. And even that is sort of a absent father thing or something, It's
his relationship with Belushi seems to be genuine, but more
sure,
professional,
yeah.
and that's fine. But no, I mean, I think it's because you're totally right. You're definitely right about the checking off the boxes thing. He's got his vision board, and he's aiming for something very particular there. However, your explanation of it makes it sound like he gets that and doesn't know what to do with it, or he's dissatisfied with the reality of it, or something. Once he has it, I don't think that's the case.
No,
he's perfectly happy with her. Once they get together.
He achieves what he wants. Yeah. In a way,
And
but
he
it's
can't
also
handle
something he
having
has to.
it in some
Yeah,
ways.
he can't hold on to it though. And I mean, I guess that's ultimately because of Robert Prosky, but you do wonder how long this would last. I mean, it's hard to say. Like the kid that they acquire at some point here, like, well, I mean, a lot of questions. Like, is there there is some sense that having that child will require him to love the child, like that the act of falling in love with having a child is the thing he's aiming at. That's what he wants. The sort of the simplicity of love and family, and of course, as somebody who has a family, Al, like me, that's a misnomer as well. That's simple. It's not, but it feels like it is. It feels like that's how you have a happy life. That's how you succeed. And that's why he wants these things. And
Well, for him, he was state raised, and so he knows like he's wants to put together the thing that he always felt denied of. And that's you and I did not come at family planning by that route.
No, of course not.
But for him, yeah, it's about acquiring the things that he felt denied when he was in prison or growing up in state facilities, which this movie posits as not too far off from prison.
And I think it plays really well to something that I loved in this movie that I think they do great is this idea of like this criminal element. Sopranos does this great as well, where like they don't really know what to do with their wealth or how to be wealthy or how to be happy or how to be satisfied. It's like they're just kind of, because at the end of the day, they're not educated. They're not like, and not that like a formal education is required to have those things, but they have this, like they talk about him, trying to use the big words and having this thing in the line that you referenced before we started recording about like, I'm wearing $150 pants, where it's like, these are all just, these are the things that I've been led to believe are checking the boxes of a happy and satisfied life and what it means to be rich, and rich is the ultimate goal of why I do these things. But there's no like broader thought about that it's like, why do I really want this? Why do I want a child? What is it that a child will do for me?
He doesn't care if it's his kid or an adopted kid. He doesn't care about that. It's just the act of having a child means something. It has totemic value.
I mean, he says and I think it's, I don't know, we're phrasing or couching this in ways that make it sound like this is a fully sociopathic thing, that he has no feelings towards this whatsoever. But I think it's actually kind of sweet how little hesitation he has about, oh, well, we'll just adopt if you can't have a kid. Like, that
he does
really
not
true.
Whatsoever.
Yeah.
He's not exactly a sociopath. No, like that's not what I'm trying to say. He is a scary motherfucker for sure. But like, he's not.
And even in the adoption agency, when he talks, I mean, in uncouth 1970s terms about taking any race or child with a disability or whatever, like, it's not about trying to pass this kid off as his own to other people, or to, it has to be from him. It's just, you think this is, I don't know. The way it plays out to me, it's him wanting to give back to other wards of the state.
He wants to take care of someone like Okla did to him, or something like that. That's, kind of filling it in his head. But it's like, it's something he wants. He's not entirely sure why, but it doesn't seem like it's still good that he wants the kid, and you get why they're not giving it to him. And it's kind of weird that he accepts, like, hey, you want a kid? I'll get you a kid. Like, he's cool with that. Like, no real questions asked about that. But you don't get the sense he's going to be a shitty father, for what it's worth.
Not a great one.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
But,
and a lot of this works so well because of James Caan, I believe. I think that I don't know that I was trying to think of like other actors of this time who could have been, and obviously IMDb had, things that may or may not be true about who else was considered about these roles, and like trying to fit. I think he's so naturally charming in kind of this like tough uncle kind of way, like he's just kind of like, he just has this way about him that's kind of like easygoing, but still with an intensity. Because I was thinking of like Al Pacino.
Yeah.
If like Al Pacino would be fine in this movie, and Al Pacino, one of the greatest actors of this generation at this time, but would have been edit muted. So, but like somebody who would have brought like this like real intensity, which I think would have hurt the character. Whereas James Caan kind of has this like, water off a duck's back, confidence, cool, kind of like thing that he brings to this. That
there's definitely an intensity to this character. I think Pacino
there's
would
an
have brought
intensity,
more,
but it's
more
not like
bombast,
defined by the intensity.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, that's the whole James Caan thing, right? He's the avuncular sort of. He's friendly, but also you always feel like he could blow up at any moment, and maybe
he might just break your finger if you piss him off.
Yeah, which we've all seen him pistol whip the guy in The Godfather so many times that we expect. That from him.
I can certainly imagine De Niro playing this role. You don't have to look farther than Heat to see what that would look like. The 70s guys could do this role. It's a 70s role, It's nice
Roy
that
Schneider was considered, apparently. He would have been good.
Yeah, he would have been good. I mean, I feel like a lot of people could succeed with a role this well written and realized, and Caan certainly does. This is the defining James Caan role for me, as a matter of fact. Like, I mean, I don't know if you did a Mount Rushmore of Caan roles. Like, it's Sunny, it's this. It's Misery, and it's Elf, probably.
Which, what a range. Think about those four movies. What a different, like, I guess this and Godfather are maybe in the same, but then to go to Misery and Elf is a pretty...
Well, no, he's
maybe some people would put Rollerball in there, but...
maybe, but I
haven't seen that one, so I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm not a Godfather, like, devotee the way some people are, so Sonny doesn't, like, loom that large for me. Frank is the James Caan role to me.
Oh yeah.
And a big part, like I said, he is so much the 70s that he makes this feel like the 70s, even though the 80s are beginning, it's
right.
81. It usually takes a year or two into a decade for that decade to start. And you can almost see the handover, like this is the exact transition point between the 70s and 80s, because you've got two things in the credits that identify it as both definitively of the 70s and then something definitively of the 80s. So it says starring James Caan. That's the 70s. Score by Tangerine Dream. That's the 80s.
What did you guys think about the movie, the music in this?
Well, I love it. Love it. Nominated for a Razzie, by the way, for worst score. How about that?
Oh, but
I saw that, which
Razzies
made
have
me
always
question
sucked.
myself because I was like, as I'm watching, I'm like, the music in this is great.
No, it's great. It's great.
And it's used so incredibly well. Like the end scene, which is the ripping guitar solo, which sounds very much like a Pink Floyd kind of thing, but it just works so well. And I'm like, maybe it's just Michael Mann using it, which I think it is him using it really well. And then I saw the Razzie nomination and I was like, am I missing something?
Nope.
Because I thought it was
the
great.
Razzies are
I
missing
thought it
something
was
because they've always
fan-
sucked.
Yeah, they suck. They're evil.
They're about getting attention, not about actually making any sort of critique.
Yeah.
But that's
Oh, you mean the organization that nominated a child for worst actor?
yes.
Yeah,
Didn't that happen just a couple years ago? It was like a 9-year-old. It's like, all right, guys, come on.
Yeah, that's not even the 80s. That was that's a good,
Yeah, that was like 2 years ago.
But to grab this film, to like seek this specific film out, to nominate for score, like I don't know, there must have been some cultural trend against electronica at that exact moment or something. Because it's the
I think you hit
Tangerine
it on the head
Dream.
there.
There was somebody like had it out for Tangerine Dream and thought that they were being uppity by doing a film score. or something.
that's
That's
sounds
probably
right.
what that
Yeah.
was. But look, now we've been through waves where 80s synth like nostalgia has come back in style a couple of times since then. That there are sequences in this movie. I mean, the opening sequence of this movie made me think less of the movie Drive. All of a sudden,
I
so was
thought
like,
of Drive
man,
several
this is-
times during this film. Yes.
But especially just like the opening 10-minute, 12-minute of just a heist with no dialogue, and how I remember being impressed with that in Drive, and like, oh yeah, but they were just ripping off Thief. Like Thief did this 30 years prior, and not that Drive does it badly. That's still a good movie. It's like, oh, this has been done actually entirely. And I don't know. You could just say the same thing. Like, we were waxing rhapsodic about that big long heist sequence in the middle, but Rafifi had done that 50 years earlier too, and that's also still a great movie. But it's okay to be in the lineage, I guess, of other movies. I don't know, but something about the Tangerine Dream score and the heist sequences made me think of Drive, and specifically like that movie was biting more off of Thief style than I had given it credit for previously.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Actually, in retrospect, I think Drive might be like you might say Thief is the biggest influence on Drive. Actually, like it's the film that it resembles the most in a lot of ways. Albert Brooks is doing a version of Prosky in it.
Yeah, that's the other reason why it came up a lot is the Prosky, and honestly, like I haven't seen Drive in a while, but I think the Carey Mulligan romance kind of plays out pretty similarly to how things end up with Tuesday Wilderness. I mean,
more or less, yeah. It also reminds me of Paul Schrader. From like Taxi Driver to Card Counter, kind of like that. Just Frank feels like a Paul Schrader man. A complicated professional with some very strong ideas about specific things. And
well, another way of saying that is 70s leading man.
yeah, that's true.
And that's Paul Schrader movies also have a way, even into the 2000 teens, of feeling like that. I feel like they have leading men from the 70s at their core.
Yeah, man. And I don't know. I feel like this film is underrated and underseen at this point, even though anyone, who has seen it probably acknowledges it. Yeah, you were mentioning this earlier. It is acknowledged as a great film, but I don't know. It's probably one of the last Mann films I saw. I think I came to this like 5 years ago, tops. Blind buy of a Criterion disc, and I've watched it, 3 times since then, including just yesterday. So, it's still kind of an up and comer from me, but man, more people need to. It's so cool, and it just looks so incredible. I just can't get over how good this film looks. This is and this is the thing that's most impressive to me about being a debut film. Just there are so many images in this film that are just sort of like blown away. What is that? Each shot a work of art or whatever that thing is.
Every frame of painting.
Yeah, every frame of painting. that one. This is very much a film for them. There are so many. Just I wrote down little images as I was watching this. Just like green office lights on the water. Like reflection of flashing bulbs on wet leather. The paint peeling off of bridges. on the Chicago rivers, shit like that.
Yeah.
It's so incredible. The used car lot from this film. How does that look so incredible? How does he? It's not even filters. I mean, I don't know that much about cameras, but it's he's doing something incredible with just the way this film catches, like, I don't know, fog or something, or
smoke and neon lights reflected and water. Yeah, everything is just exactly the right amount of wet. He's right. That car lot looks incredible, and it's not like the cars are beautiful or anything. They're these like big heaping 1970s, metal boxes. But it looks so cool at night.
And he's not, he never seems like he's trying to hit you over the head with how great of a shot it is, which I think a lot of, especially young filmmakers, do. They're like, okay, we're going to have this great shot and we're going to really just drive home what a great shot this is. And I want the audience to be so impressed with what this shot is. And he's
on some of that stuff,
Yeah.
Man does that time to time. I don't think it's so much in deep,
we'll get
there.
He might, in this movie. But there was a point when I was watching it, I was like, God, I hope they play this at the Music Box or something where I can go see this on the big screen. And it doesn't at first strike as a movie that would need to be on the big screen.
That.
But it's like it is. There's like this
but
subtle beauty to it, and just like the framing of when they're in their diner, and simple things that shouldn't necessarily, like you said, the car lot doesn't necessarily have to be a beautiful shot, but he makes it work. And I think framing is a lot, just having this natural visual eye where you just know exactly kind of how to frame things without it needing to be a big sweeping, landscape or whatnot. And Chicago just looks great. Can we talk about the Chicago of it all?
Yeah.
Chicago is a great looking city. Early 80s Chicago is just, God, you point a camera at almost anything and it's going to look great.
It's a city with character, which is great. There's one thing that I bump on a little bit in this from a Chicagoan perspective. It's that apparently Frank, in addition to his used car lot, he owns the Green Mill bar. I mean, I love this as a crime movie thing. That there's a bar that he walks into that takes his messages for him. And he communicates people out of there. That's just fantastic. But the thing about this is the Green Mill is kind of like a famous landmark place in Chicago. It was like Al Capone's hangout back in the day, and still kind of dines out on that. And so it was very cool when, like, I watched this week, but also I had, during the pandemic, I had queued it up at some point, and I was watching it at the time. I was living like 100 yards from that place, basically. And that was kind of cool. And then at the end, he blows up like, wait, did he own that too? Like, I don't know what that is. It's like, if this were set in New York and it's like it turns out he owns Katz's Deli or something. Like,
the Green Mill of New York. Katz's Deli.
Be a deli. It doesn't have to be one people actually know.
Yeah. Now, did he own the Green Mill? Because I know the guy was like taking his messages, but I took that as like, because I love this in like 70s movies too. Nobody's got a cell phone. So you just have to like find.
Well, that's how I took it until he blew it up.
Out.
I didn't think even at the end Frank would blow up somebody else's place in order, because he's in the process of burning his own life down. His own.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what he's
just burning down everywhere. Mm-hmm. I bought a pack of wondering why he gas station, so I'm gonna blow it up.
At the time, I was like,
he goes up. They show a shot of just one particular seat in the bleachers of Wrigley Field on fire.
Got to leave it all behind.
Yeah. Nothing I've touched. Sorry.
Yeah, I actually do have a question about that. I was kind of curious, just like, wait, well, why is he taking out the Green Mill at this point? Like, that doesn't seem necessary. Just because he was there, does he own it? And knowing it's now famous, I didn't know that. I don't know Chicago landmarks. But,
I don't know. It's not. Maybe it's not that famous. I just lived right next to it for a while, so I was aware of it.
It's pretty big. I've been once, and I did, as he was walking by, say to myself at 1:00 in the morning, "That's the booth that I sat in." As he went by, because I could see it. But I feel like it has a lot of, because it's big, because it was Capone's hangout, and they have tunnels behind the bar. And they used to open them up if you requested, and they have like little things that they go down, and that's how they used to bring. So it was like his speakeasy, and these tunnels would go to wherever they hid the liquor and things like that. So I don't know how it is outside of Chicago, but inside of Chicago, I feel like it is kind of a fairly well-known landmark place. I mean, as anything will be once it's there for 100 years and doesn't get,
Yeah,
it's
that
just
probably in 1980 that was less of a thing. Like the tourism element of it had not quite developed as much or whatever. But this is a real big nitpick. Overall, just a great use of it's industrial. He's taking meetings in scrapyards, and the griminess, but also just it's a big maze of steel and concrete, and him and Belushi know exactly how to navigate it, and that's part of what is so appealing about this, the professional element, that this is just his environment. You can't, even though the police cannot intimidate him here because he knows these streets like the back of his hand, and he thinks that they're his as much as they are the cops.
The cops are just pretty much a nuisance in this, right? Like, I mean, they kick his ass at one point, but that's about it. And
this is not a flabby movie by any means. It's 2 hours and like no minutes long, basically. But it occurred to me that you could remove the cops from this entirely. They don't factor into anything in the last half hour whatsoever. They give him a hard time. He tells them to fuck off, and that's basically it.
Yeah, that's good stuff, though.
It is.
You don't need the movie to be any shorter, and I don't mind them being there. You could tighten it up, I guess, but whatever. I like all
there
that.
is like a feeling. I like all the it does seem like he's untouchable to a certain point.
That's the thing.
And then that makes the downfall so strong, because you're kind of watching. You're like, again, watching it for the first time, I'm like, okay, the heist succeeded. Now he's on a beach, and now they're just kind of hanging out, and you kind of know at that point what the ultimate problem is going to be. It's hinted at and it's there, but it just it is kind of fun that everything seems to be going really well. Seems to go. Cops are coming after him. Oop, not a problem. He's just sarcastic to them, and it works out. And so then that makes that downfall is just okay, but something, there's a net that is coming around him. Something is trapping him in. It's just not as in your face about it. And one last thing, as we're just to stop back, not to the Green Mill, but the other incredible Chicago landmark that is seen in this movie that I don't want to pass by, the original Potbelly is next to the bar. I don't know if you guys caught that when he walks out of Harrigan's, which is a real bar that is still there on Lincoln Avenue. And he walks out, and right next door is Potbelly, and it is the original Potbelly. So a lot of great Chicago landmarks there.
Potbelly's a sandwich chain, John.
Yeah, we got him in New York. We got him.
Okay. I have never been to one in New York. I didn't know if they made it that far.
Only recently, I think. Last 10, 12 years, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think.
But we talked about the noose tightening on him, and yes, you're right. There is that frolicking on the beach sequence that comes, I don't know what it is, 80 minutes into this movie. And there's just something where if you're the type of person who's on movie podcasts, you've seen enough of them, you see a sequence that happy and you just get, your stomach starts to drop because you're aware of there's still half an hour left in this movie.
Yeah, 25 minutes to go.
Something's got to happen here. I've been on a movie, on a gambling movie kick lately. This was last week. I watched a bunch of gambling movies, and I found that it's so hyper specific there, where they start going on an upswing, and I'm just like, ugh, there's still 45 minutes left in this movie. Or I could just this sequence I know is not over yet. And I could feel the turn coming, because it's the same sequence in every one of them where they're up big and they can't quit. And so it's all got to go away. And it almost, I got a similar feeling out of Thief almost from when Belushi is tackling his wife in the surf.
Is there a happy ending for this guy? I mean, if he's able to get out, with his $800,000 and his wife and his kid, and they got a house, and he presumably is out of the life and goes straight and just kind of lives on the money. I mean, how does that work? Does he have any idea how to do that? Where's he at 5 years later? I mean, or is it just inevitable that he has to burn this down in some way? Was that always going to happen?
I think it's hard to say. I think he could retire. I don't think he needs to just be hacking into safes to feel alive. Exactly.
Right.
I think if he went back to it, it'd be because he couldn't make the money work straight as well as he thought it could. or whatever. I mean, I don't know.
Maybe.
I guess in that version where Prosky leaves him alone, basically, like, does he just put the money into the used car lot and it's fine and he runs the used car lot normally? Maybe he could do that more so than a lot of crime protagonists that are like doomed protagonists like this. That he's not. I mean,
probably, but he's cast himself in a role I don't know that he understands how to play. You know, like loving father and husband and legitimate businessman. He has no experience with those things.
Yeah,
right,
and do we know that he reunites with? I kind of forget what the dialogue, because he kind of sends her off and was like, just
I don't
disappear.
think he reunites. I think
I don't think so.
Right?
Yeah, I think he burns it all down.
He's
they
the
shot a
gunman
scene
walking out of the
him
old West
reuniting.
town.
They shot a scene of them reuniting at the end, but just elected not to use it because Mann preferred him walking off into parts unknown. So that's
a great choice. That I love when a movie just ends with that. Just, we don't need the Animal House update on how what every character did. Though in this one it would just be deceased, except
Right.
for him. But yeah, just let him walk off and let our imaginations do the work.
I mean, I just think of it as an Unforgiven thing, just like, okay, well, I guess this is who I always was, and this is who I have to be, the lonely man walks off kind of, forced to be what he always truly was at heart. And no matter how much he tries to escape it, that's who he is, the thief.
Well, but this is not.
He goes back to thieving. He must. That's
he must.
yeah,
well, he's
no.
also crossed a boundary. He wasn't a murderer up until this point, right? Or at least
He
wasn't established.
He was a manslaughterer.
manslaughter. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Manslaughter. Yeah, but like,
But yeah,
I mean,
we rolled over that too. That in that great,
The
booth
diner scene.
the diner scene, like that's about as good as the one in Heat almost. But I believe he sort of quickly, almost casually, reveals to her that he was gang raped in prison.
He talks around it a little.
A little, but he's not that much. It's not quite subtext. But anyway, I don't know. It's like I said, there's definitely a version of this movie that we've seen a lot of where he destroys the relationship with Tuesday Weld because he can't walk away from because of his compulsion. He can't stop committing crimes, for their own sake or for the action or whatever. But it's not that. He's extorted and he pushes her away as a means of protection. And
yeah, it's a Harry and the Hendersons thing.
yes.
Get out of here, Harry. We don't want you anymore.
Where that's a pretext for him to go back to what he knows best and prefers. And I don't think this movie is positing that. I think it really is just that. I mean, it's positing
he can't escape who he is, I think. It's the life. It gets into your skin. You can't get away from the life, Al. How you going to get away from the life?
Well, I think it's because the Chicago outfit will come after you in this movie. It's not because Khan's compulsion means that he's going to be, shoplifting gum from convenience stores just to get a little kick or anything. Or how does De Niro put it in Heat? Sticking up liquor stores with "Born to Lose" tattooed on his forehead. Like that's not him. But there is something there. It's almost like deeper than that.
Well, it is the Neil McCauley
as he lays
thing.
out
It's
the
the
whole
Neil McCauley
psychology.
thing.
Well, yeah, and the whole psychology of prison that he lays out for her, though, where he finds all his strength from having nothing, and therefore having nothing to lose, and being able to be fearless and whatever and everything, and that allows him to be wildly successful in this crime milieu. But it does not equip him to actually handle success. Once he has things and has things to lose, he feels incredibly vulnerable, and that's the crux of the great Prosky monologue about "I own the paper on your fucking life," and God, just one of the greatest villain scenes, speeches.
God, so
ever.
good, upside down the whole time too.
Yeah.
What a sense of dread.
But at least not so cleanly. I mean, so clearly that it's just that. Yeah. Now that you have things to lose, and therefore you're like, it's like Samson has his hair cut off.
It's Heat again. It's. I mean, as far as the filmography goes, there's probably no better companion film to Heat than Thief, because it's a lot of the same ideas, and it's the big line from that film is, "Don't have anything in your life that you can't drop at a moment's notice when you see the heat around the corner." I mean, that's essentially the same thing that's going on here at the end, where it's just like, oh no, I have things that matter now. I have to divest myself of them to be the super thief power murderer that can survive and put this thing to rest. You know, like he has to embrace the darkness at the end, because he took stuff up that he has to protect now. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you're saying. He has vulnerability now.
But that's different than compulsion, I guess. It's not or compulsively chasing action, which is a different.
Yeah, he's not doing that. He's not doing that, which is interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, but that doesn't seem to be something that Mann is fixated on. I don't think there's a lot of compulsion in Mann films. I mean, looking over it, that doesn't seem to be the deal. It seems to be circumstance and the choices you make kind of haunt you. You know, stuff that you've done that can't let you go. That's more. Yeah.
And there's a sense of not being able to do anything else. I mean, that's, I guess, when we get to the thief diner scene, they're going to lay that out very directly too. Yes, that we do this thing because I don't think we'd be good for anything else. But also in Heat, like there is like the Tom Sizemore character in Heat, for example, is more of a compulsive action junkie thing. And you get that briefly, but he's a supporting character there because that's not what interests Mann as much. I think, you know, he's so much of what, again, the prison is such a big deal in Michael Mann movies. And I think part of that's, he shot the Jericho Mile in Folsom Prison, did a lot of talking with prisoners, that a lot of that background went into Thief and into Heat eventually and all that. And he's fascinated by a certain type of criminal and a certain type of prisoner and their relationship to that. And I think he saw enough prisoners there. He knows that there is this other type, but they're just not as interesting to him. More basic criminal bitches. Mm-hmm. He wants the samurai monk criminal, of which he met a couple and was very enamored, I think.
Yeah. Oh God. It all works so well, man. Like all these kind of versions and ideas of who this guy is. It really, it's as successful a character study as I've seen in a while, you know, to actually kind of get into the skin of this guy and see, like, you understand every choice he makes. You understand why this guy would do that thing when he gets furious and flips his shit in the adoption center, or, you know, pulls a gun on the guy at the beginning. You know, it's all just like, yeah, of course he would. Of course he'd do that. It's a phenomenal performance, phenomenal character. Total success with Frank. Based on a real guy, apparently. Based on a memoir, this movie, oddly enough.
Yeah, but
Frank
Mann says that they negotiated to rights to that memoir for forever, and so they had to put it in the credits, but he ended up using none of it. The guy.
Good.
Like Mann seems to talk about him in the interview I read anyway, with like kind of a disdain for that guy.
Mann knows criminals too, so yeah.
Well, and the name of that book is called The Home Invaders by a guy who was a burglar. And Frank, the character in this, is very specific with Prosky when they're negotiating terms up front that no cowboy shit, no home invasions, which is, of course, ironic because the movie ends with him performing a home invasion on Prosky and murdering him. So
that's true. I think about that.
Should we talk about Robert Prosky?
A little bit.
I would love to.
He's pretty fucking good in this.
He is.
He's so good.
Fantastic.
Yeah. First role.
First role, right? First movie role.
Amazing.
Yeah, stage actor before that.
Yeah. And
Gotta be a
I only
Chicago
knew
guy,
him.
right?
I mean, I really know him as the ticket guy in Last Action Hero.
Sure.
And the judge in Miracle on 34th Street.
Yeah.
So this was a little bit of a departure, but I think it also added to something because he was able to bring such like a kind
John
of like,
knows him as the owner of FAO Schwartz in Home Alone 2, and I know him as the vampire horror movie host in Gremlins 2 that wants to be a real journalist.
Oh, right. He's doing like the
Wow,
Al Lewis.
yes.
Yeah. It is him. I mean, that's funny. He's a guy who I really knew as sort of a children's movie mainstay because, you know,
Right.
a lot of the movies he was making for kids were right in my age bracket, late 80s, 90s, you know, like the kind of stuff I would watch. And so it was a real surprise to see stuff like this later in life, you know, this or Christine, which we talked about, which he's great in as just a filthy beast of a man. And apparently he was in like the original production of Glengarry Glen Ross, shit like that. He would have been good in that, man. That would have been a cool thing to see. He's a wonderful actor, and he's especially good at playing heavies, it turns out. Like
it's so weird coming off Miracle on 34th Street and Last Action Hero, like Tim was talking about. Like I did not.
Yeah.
That was a revelation to me when I first saw this movie too.
It like he has like a warmness to him that works so well at the beginning of this movie because he like you kind of trust him, even though you know he's a mob boss, and you kind of know again like it was someone who was a little bit more of like a for lack of a better, like a Gandolfini or any of the Sopranos guys who's got a little bit more of an edge where it's like, okay, from the beginning, you're like, it's so obvious this guy is going to be the ultimate bad guy and this is it. Exactly. But he just kind of has this warmness that kind of sucks you in and just kind of makes you believe like, oh no, he's just kind of like a father figure. I mean, deep down you kind of know, but, and then when he turns, it's like, boy, it's good. It's good.
There's other actors you could think of playing this role because you can see them doing the turn and being the last 15 to 20 minutes of this movie. You could see lots of gangster movie staple guys being that. Mm-hmm. What all of them do is exactly what Dan said. The problem is they would telegraph that from the opening scenes. And that's what Prosky is so good at, that because he is so warm in those opening scenes. In the beginning, he's so much more reasonable than Frank in their negotiations.
Yes.
He's like, hey man, I want to pay you to do some big jobs because you're a professional and I respect your work and I'll work on your terms. And Khan's just like, well, fuck you for offering me a job. Who are you to try and pay me $500,000 and let me name my terms and who I work with and when and how? And he's so, and Prosky's just shrugs out all that off and he's like, hey man, just, I just want to work with you. We'll do it your way. You don't owe me nothing long term. And because it's Prosky and because it's not a Gandolfini or, I don't know, Christopher Walken or anybody, like, even when you have a movie brain and you're sort of crunching these things, you can see a version of this movie for about an hour where, well, maybe Prosky is actually like the sweetheart, nice guy gangster. And maybe like the dirty cops will off him. And that was what will drive Khan to take his revenge in the final act. But instead we get this incredible turn where it's Prosky off and Belushi. And it's just, when he goes evil, it is chilling.
Yeah, you're right. He comes across as like Paul Sorvino in Goodfellas for a while. He has an edge, but he's still kind of, avuncular, a bit of a father figure. Yeah. And that's
a great comparison.
When he goes bricktop in the last half hour, then it's fantastic. It's one of the best turns of this type that I've seen in any film, and the dialogue they give him is so fucking cool. The bad guy dialogue in the chroming vats where they're disposing of Belushi's body, it's like, your fucking wife and daughter, your son, they're going to come out in wimpy burgers and people won't even know they're eating them. It's the creepiest shit. What is it? You're working for me till you're old, till you're used up, you piece of shit. All of that. God, it's the best turn. And speaking of Belushi getting killed, one of the best deaths in movies, in my opinion. Now, part of that is it's James Belushi.
He lobbied, demanded to do the stunt himself to get shot up.
He gets cut in half with this shotgun so hard. It is, it's the best shotgun death ever, I think. And it's so shocking. It's just like,
you get some slow motion as he is blasted against the side of a van, and like the Tangerine Dream really like lays on some synth and guitars. It's almost like maybe that's the moment when the 1980s start. The score sting when he gets shotgun blasted. That's when the 70s movie ends and we're into the 80s.
Yeah,
I said I don't think 80 and 81 is the 80s, because like Escape from New York is also 81. I think that's also a 70s movie.
Oh sure, yeah.
Right around here is where it begins.
Yeah.
Also, the Belushis belong to the 70s in a way.
Yeah, I mean the good one, is all 70s.
So the death of a Belushi is not a bad way to mark the end of the 70s. Is all I'm saying.
I think that Jim Belushi was, and we'll see how you guys feel, but miscast in this movie. And I'm not a Jim Belushi hater, kind of, but I don't know. He's been good in a couple things, but I think he was the one weaker point. And luckily he doesn't say a lot, he doesn't do a lot, so that's fine. But like,
Well, he screams Chicago to me, I must admit, guys.
There you go. Yeah.
Much as Del Close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, Del Close as the mechanic.
Right.
That was that's always
great.
incredible to see. Yeah. I always love sorry, not to segue onto this, but as a person who spent years in the Chicago improv community and literally worked in a building where we had Del Close's ashes and a giant mural, and he is this like guru. He is he invented this art
Saint
form,
Del,
and he is revered and everything like that. And then every time you see him in a movie, it's like one or two lines, and like you're kind of reminded that it's like, oh yeah, this guy kind of just struggled to actually make it for most of his life outside of the improv world. It was always just like, convincing Jim Belushi to give him one or two lines in Thief.
It's amazing how often people need to be forcibly reminded that short form improv skills translate to no success in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Seems like it'd be used in all kinds of situations. Financially, not so much.
Well, so the thing about Belushi in this, though, is he's probably the least proficient actor on screen in a major role.
I think he's actually good in this movie.
I do too. I think he's fine. I think he's.
You do? Okay, all right.
Yeah, I've never seen anything else that I thought he was good in.
I mean, he's really good in the new Twin Peaks. He's terrific in that.
Okay.
Is he? He's good in About
that.
Last Night. Have you guys ever seen About Last Night?
No.
More of a romantic comedy. It's based on a David Mamet play.
Yeah, the David Mamet one. Right. Uh-huh.
Is he the star of that, or is it a supporting thing?
No, he's the best friend. So it's Rob Lowe is the star, but Belushi actually played the Rob Lowe role on the stage version. And then when they made it, they said we have a Rob Lowe, so we're going to use him as the charming, handsome lead. Okay, so I'm in the minority. I mean, I didn't think he was. I don't have a replacement. I was racking my mind the entire time.
It's funny. I mean, it's funny how starkly that lays out. That James Belushi basically can be Rob Lowe, but only if you're between like Addison and 52nd Street and probably like Western Avenue to the west.
Yeah.
And in that square, he is Rob Lowe's peer. Outside of that, though, he's got to relegate him to the friend role.
I do give him credit in this film, but I think the truth is his death scene overshadows most of his performance for me. I just like him getting blown up with a shotgun so much that I'm kind of like, that's a good Jim Belushi role.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not much is asked of him beyond that, and he gives good Chicago for sure. And
that's true. He's got great chops too, not acting chops, but
mutton chops.
Sideburns are incredible.
Well, again, in the milieu we're talking about, in this square of Chicago, yes, when you say chops, we're going to assume you mean pork and not not acting. Man, okay. Who else is in this movie? We didn't talk about Willie Nelson at all. That's a weird one because I think he's actually pretty good in this movie.
I do too. I think he's a good actor.
He's really only got one scene in this movie, but he shows up on the vision board when James Caan pulls out his pocket collage that he has created, this really weird, childish, endearing thing. But there's a moment there where we haven't seen Willie Nelson in this movie yet. So you just see his picture among all the other like cutout pieces of magazines and whatnot in this. And there's part of you that just go like, you don't think, oh, that's Okla, his mentor from prison. You just kind of go,
Willie Nelson.
Yo, is that Willie Nelson? This guy doesn't really into Willie Nelson?
That's really funny. I didn't even think about that because I knew that he was going to be in the movie, but I wish I hadn't known and just thought that he was, But he is great. He's got such a weird energy that he's bringing to it. And he because he has like this weird eye contact, the way that he's leaning over, he does play like a guy who is locked away in prison and facing his death and just has like this just this really odd energy that I love.
Well, it's a really odd scene when he visits in prison because they keep their faces about 2 inches from the glass. It is so oddly intimate. And then, he's kind of being warm and fatherly with Caan, but he's also kind of like looking over his shoulder constantly, I guess, because he's still on the inside and has to, watch out for shivs and whatnot. And he's just being kind of squirrely. But he does. I mean, it's actually a really good scene between him and Caan. I mean, holding your own as an actor in a scene like that with James Caan as Prime, not the easiest assignment. But I think he does really well. I love his little bit about never lie to anybody, because if they're really important to you, the lie will poison it. And if it's a stranger, what the fuck do you have to lie to them for? And it's great. I mean, not totally practical, because actually it turns out there's a lot of things that Khan's character should lie to strangers about, where he gets his money, for starters. But, I don't know, maybe you should lie to the adoption agency about some things.
They'd probably figure most of it out.
Yeah, they probably would.
Yeah, but I mean, he is the good father to Prosky's bad father. I mean, it's a role that I think is more important than his one scene implies, because he is the template that Frank has built himself on, or built his dream collage, or certainly who we presume kind of taught him how to be a master thief. To some extent, at least in jail. But he seems to have enormous sway over Frank through the whole film. Basically he tells him you don't lie to her. Next scene is him okay, I'm going to tell Tuesday Weld the truth on our first date. And so he creates Frank, essentially. At least that's the implication I'm getting from it. That he is
for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely in terms of the skills. It's established, he's the radioactive spider that gives Frank his superhuman thief skills. But also, I think you were kind of getting at that earlier, John, that Frank models his idea of family after, he had to have a father figure that he could be trying to emulate with his new family to try and recreate what he got there. And yeah, you're right. He casts a bigger shadow than that one real scene of dialogue would indicate.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Okla is he gave him the ideas of here's what you need to be happy. That seems like more of a social construct kind of thing. But it's definitely it feels like that's the intimacy that he knows he's after. That sort of real relationship that he has with Okla. That's what he wants, ultimately. I think. And he thinks that all these things, that family and success are the route to that. This is my read on it, I think. In a sense, it's the only true thing, the only real thing he's had in his life, probably. And so that he's chasing that.
It also, what Willie Nelson brings to this movie and that character is the wonderful, wonderful scene of the judge and the lawyer negotiating a bribe in open court.
What a crazy good scene. Yeah. This feels so authentic.
Yeah. And it's so lo-fi too. It's not like there's no cell phones or texting or anything. It's just them, the way they hold their faces with different numbers of fingers pointing up. And it is both obvious and also you can see they have plausible deniability.
And it took me a second to I was like, why? Because I saw the judge sitting weird, and then I thought the lawyer was making fun of him in the way that he was doing it. And then it took me a second to realize, and I don't know if that was just, maybe I'm not as versed in a courtroom. I feel like you guys are both lawyers, so you can spot, bribes being. Oh, you're not a lawyer? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I assume everyone. I know Al's a lawyer, so I assume everyone he hangs out
interact with this. Some of them are judges I'm trying to bribe.
Yeah, that was a great scene. What was another really fantastic scene that I love? And it was such a simple one. Is when they're on the roof overlooking the California bank.
So good. Mm-hmm.
Which was funny for me because it was the first time I was like, oh, clearly this wasn't filmed in Chicago. And then then immediately was like, oh, it's not supposed to be Chicago. It's okay. But my radar is so strong whenever I'm watching a Chicago movie and I can tell that they did a scene outside.
Well, that's the problem is it's not just that they're going to a different place. They're using Los Angeles. So you think for a minute, they substitute Los Angeles for all kinds of places.
Yeah, exactly.
Unconvincingly. Not they. Michael Mann would never. But we don't know that about him yet because this is his first movie.
Yeah. Steven Seagal would. All his Chicago movies all of a sudden have palm trees in them at some point. Yeah. But when they're standing on the roof overlooking and they're kind of talking about, they're just kind of walking through the plan, kind of discussing with each other. And Belushi's like, that's too many systems or whatever it is. And I was like, this is such a great scene of them kind of laying out for you so that the audience knows what this is going to entail and all this technical stuff that we love. And I was like, nowadays, if you made this scene, it would just all be quips and one-liners and somebody saying well, I'm the best that there is and da-da-da. And all this kind of nonsense that doesn't really move. And this is just more no, this
process.
is really how this scene would go, is like they just kind of have to discuss the nuts and bolts. It's real quick. It just gives you an idea of like these professionals planning this out. I loved it. And there was a lot of that in this movie, but I felt like that one in particular was like, I'm like, man, what a great use of that.
You're right, though. It is conspicuously missing the beat of them laying out for Prosky and kind of like razzing him, like, you know, giving him crap about it's impossible. There's 5 systems. You couldn't do this. You can't find anybody who could get through 3 of these. It's like, okay, I guess we won't do it. Nah, you're lucky you got me, because nobody else can do 3. I'll do them all in 2 days.
Yeah.
And this man protagonists are too professional for that. Just, you know, the dick swinging element. And it's also it wouldn't make sense at that point of the heist, but it is, you're right, how a lot of movies would do it. We just try and add some jardinera to the scene. To keep it
sure. Belushi probably tried to riff a couple of those lines and they just cut them out. That's what I choose to believe. I don't know this, but I choose to believe he kept trying to improv throughout the movie and then they just had to cut it out.
It is kind of remarkable how for as much, you know, as many speeches, as much yelling and cursing and you know, shouting at one another in this world of tough guys doing crimes, how little actual posturing there is in this. I mean, yeah,
well, all the posturing is on the part of Frank, and that's the thing that there's some things that date this movie. You know, like the analog nature of things, right? It'd be totally different now because it's Black Cat. Though.
Yeah,
you know, I mean the bribery scene that we were talking about, that's just been ruined by inflation. Because you can't negotiate a $19,000 bribe with just your fingers on your face. You got to stick to 8 or below. But there's a way of viewing this movie. You could reduce it down to, this is a guy who is an independent contractor and is so deeply committed to staying in the gig economy that when offered a payroll job, he goes on a shooting spree and kills his boss. It has very much not the spirit of 2023.
Well, I mean, yeah, I suppose. I mean, it's the difference between being offered a payroll gig and, you know, being threatened with murdering your wife and children and working you to death like a slave. I mean, I guess that's what a job is ultimately.
It's a fine line, but that's not what people are scared of in today's economy. You know? Oh, my employer's never going to let me go, and my mental health benefits will be too good.
That's fair. I don't know. Yeah, I think it is. These films are like predicated on the idea that we have to actually stop doing this. You know, it's that thing. They're not compelled to keep being thieves. You know, it is a logical process, a means to an end, a solution to a problem. You know, this thieving thing. It's a shame it's the thing you're excellent at, because it is, you know, it's something that you have to get out of as soon as you are able, or you will die in the life, you know, presumably, or get locked up and go to jail and die in prison. And there's nothing worse than dying in prison, as we know from this. So, you know, I don't know, perhaps it's a dramatic device to some extent, but, you know, in a film as devoted to a character study as Thief is, I buy it completely, you know, like it's not what he wants to do. It's his curse that he's excellent at it.
Yeah. And it goes to what you were saying before too, about everything lining up so well, like everything making sense. Everything they establish for the character makes sense for what he's doing. Like his impulsiveness, his like lack of desire of being controlled, but then also they establish that, well, he wants to have this family and he wants to have these things that are on his vision board. Mm-hmm. And so when offered an opportunity to find a way towards that, he's like, okay, well, I guess I can sacrifice these other things that I want, that my desire to live in this gig economy.
He can't give that up. That's the thing. He gets everything on the vision board offered to him, but he has to give up some freedom and autonomy to do it. And because the psychology is forged out of prison and that experience where you have no control over things. And that's a part of where I think the monk-like ascetic nature of these terrorists comes from. It's exercising complete control over the small elements of your life that you can control when you're in prison, and your own psychology. And that's sort of where that's born out of. And he's so defined by that that even when he's offered everything on his vision board on a silver platter, he can't accept that it comes with the price of having a steady paycheck and a manager that he answers to.
Losing control, losing a specific.
He'd rather
matter.
burn it down.
Now, do you think there's a version of this story that ends well, where he works for Prosky for another couple of years, pulls off another half dozen jobs, and they are able to negotiate an equitable departure from the role? Or is it no way? No, this Prosky is who he is. He's gonna milk him for all he's worth and then dispose of him or something like that. It seems that's probably the case with Prosky.
It's more that Frankus is who he is. And I think the negotiations are always going to be fraught. And maybe there's a version where he trains a successor and has a more managed off ramp to retirement that Prosky could live with. But no, the two of them could not reach that settlement.
Yeah. And I think if you look at the real history of most cat burglars, they all either were eventually killed by the mafia or became technical advisors for Michael Mann films. It's really the only two career paths for that.
It is interesting, the crime to Hollywood expert, or that is an actual pipeline with people like Scorsese and Mann. Like, like half the people in Goodfellas are actual mafiosa, and then half of them
and then Jordan Belfort
continuing to do it. Yeah, well, another one. Yeah, it's an odd thing, and probably not the best argument for those films in a way, but it makes them more authentic. And that's one of the best things about them. So,
yeah, the authenticity is one of the best things about it.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know. Do we need to say anything about Tuesday Weld? She's in the film. I think she's well cast. Kind of got an aging beauty thing going. Still seems like she lived a hard life. Yeah.
Yeah. I know her from nothing besides this. So I say she's fine in a role that is sort of underwritten.
Yeah. You get her deal. She's got that little monologue about being poor in Mexico City and Bogota, which you're like, oh, yeah, you've had some shit. You've walked through some bad stuff.
Well, yeah, just knowing that her defining experience was a bad relationship with an even worse criminal than Frank. Yeah. And then suddenly, okay, your willingness to get in bed with him so fast, metaphorically, makes more sense in that context. Maybe it's not, the character's not underwritten in that diner scene is so efficient at sketching out that whole relationship for me, but she doesn't have a ton to do. And she's not bad, but she's not great.
She is saddled with a bit of it's the symbolic nature of the role. And I mean symbolic to Frank in a way. This is why I say I don't think they're exactly in love. They have affection for each other and they like being around each other clearly, but like it does seem like they're kind of just like, well, this solves a problem, in both cases, Looking at her resume, it's a bunch of movies I've heard the names of and haven't actually seen. Author, Looking for Mr. Goodbar, Once Upon a Time in America. That's one of my unseen Scorsese's. The only thing I recognize her from is
Time in
Falling
America
Down.
is that's not Scorsese.
Oh, is that Leone? That's Leone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, Falling Down. Is that the Michael
Michael Douglas?
Douglas? Yeah,
Yeah, she plays Robert Duvall's shrieking harridan of a wife.
Boy, I wonder if that movie holds up.
I bet not.
I would guess it probably one of the worst
aging
as far as holding up. I can't imagine.
I bet that's a rough watch in 2023. Yeah.
Yeah, a white guy walking around with a big plate of guns taking out minorities who he feels have annoyed him. Yeah,
I've had enough of you, Korean grocery store owner. Yeah,
I think that's gonna.
Well, yeah, it's doing almost a Wizard of Oz thing where he's like touring the different ghettos of Los Angeles in order to have encounters with caricatures of different racial groups. In turn,
I'm going to say it doesn't.
I don't know. I think that movie actually has its adherence. I haven't seen it since
it does
2000, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's been a while. I'm sure it is a hell of a watch 30 years later or whatever.
I'm going to stick to Waiting for Mr. Goodbar and Gremlins 2, the new batch, for my thief adjacent rewatches.
All right. Well, that's Thief, I think. Hey, what an exciting film to start Michael Mann with, right? This promises so much about the next bunch of films we're going to watch. I'm super excited after doing this one, man. This was awesome. I love this film. Great movie.
Okay, one last question for you guys to go out on. Where is this on your overall Chicago movie rankings? And what's your number one?
Well, Blues Brothers is probably my number one, I'm afraid, guys.
No, I think that's I have put a tremendous amount of thought in this on a day-to-day basis of like, now this one, because this one's new to me, it's like hard to figure out. I would say it's easy for it to sneak into the top 5. There's a couple, like, I think Blues Brothers is hard to argue with. The Fugitive, though, is right up there.
I think this is a better movie than Blues Brothers.
Can I pitch you guys a Chicago movie draft episode?
That sounds okay.
And we'll just hash this out over 90 minutes?
I do have
Even though I just said my answer, so now it's spoils. But
well, there's lots of things you could include. I mean, I'm eliminating all of John Hughes movies out of hand. Although
Shermer, Illinois.
Ferris Bueller.
Yeah, most of those are Chicago. Ferris Bueller, I think you can, or most of those are suburb. Ferris Bueller, I think you can call Chicago because most of it takes
definitely
place.
is one, but I'm not a huge fan of that movie. So I don't know. I think a lot of people love Backdraft. I don't know if that counts, but I don't know. This might be my number one. It's really good. The only thing, I think the thing that hurts a little bit is that now it's so dated that it almost feels like it's from a different country just because it's such a different era. Would The Untouchables really be a Chicago movie? This one's so modern in a way.
Wait, is Untouchables a Chicago movie? I think that, yeah.
No, that's the Chicago way. Yeah, that's how you get Capone.
It is. I know, but it's 100 years ago now. Like, does that count? Does that count in the same way? I don't know.
I mean, yeah, that's doing a prohibition thing. That's
Once Upon a Time in New York really a New York movie when you think about it?
No, I would say no. I think New York movies start in the 70s for me in a way. Gangs of New York is not one of my classic New York movies.
I was thinking of New York, the Liza Minnelli 3-hour abusive relationship Robert De Niro film that Scorsese made, not the 3-hour abusive relationship De Niro film.
I think for me, this and High Fidelity are two of my favorite Chicago movies.
Yeah. I think any of those are good answers.
I don't have a real good answer. That's why I went with Blues Brothers. Which is
that's perfect.
I think I will say, as a lifelong Chicagoan, Blues Brothers is a great answer, and I think it might be the answer.
I think it's the one that people who don't live in Chicago would readily know. That's my guess.
It's not going to get you spit on at any Chicago bar, though.
I mean, Thief is a better movie than Blues Brothers. I think it's just Blues Brothers just shrieks Chicago to me. So.
Well, it does the tour of landmarks thing that Ferris Bueller does.
Mm-hmm. Even Dark Knight, I know that's kind of like an outside one because it's not technically set in Chicago, but boy, does that show off Chicago well.
It's a top 5 for me because
I mean, I would put it in there.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, then the next movie, it's a New York movie. You know, that's the weird thing about. I mean, he's doing a thing. Gotham is all cities, but it's definitely Chicago in Dark Knight. Yeah.
All right. But I think by consensus, Thief is in everybody's top 3. So I think Thief just took the crown officially for Framework.
I'll accept it. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, it's a good movie, a great movie, a terrific movie. And, if you listen to this and you hadn't seen it, you shouldn't have done that. You should have just watched it and then come back and listen to it. But otherwise, like everyone who hasn't seen this film, and I suspect it's more people than there ought to be. This is not as widely seen as Heat or The Insider or Mohicans. This one is right up there. It kicks all the ass. It's great.
And now is Tangerine Dream going to play us out?
I don't know. We'll find out.
That close enough?
Yeah. Yes, it is. All right. Thanks for listening.
That's why I thought you was good like that.